Mark 11. Well, Mark is a good book, and especially chapter 11 and on, to chart out the last week of Jesus' life, traditionally called the week of his passion or the week of his death. There are good time markers beginning in Mark 11 with, actually, this is the day of the triumphal entry, and we generally can mark forward from that Sunday. In fact, verse 12 here, Mark 11:12, the next day. Verse 20, we have in the morning, so we easily can mark our next 2 days after that. And then 14:1, it says after 2 days. So we skip from Tuesday through Wednesday into Thursday. And then verse 12 has the Greek conjunction and, as though it's tying an idea together. This happened in the morning or after 2 days and this. And we'll talk about this in a moment. There seems to be a parenthetical story given between verses 3 and verse 11. And then 15:1 we have again in the morning. So Mark seems to be charting out for us, literally, how the last week of Jesus' life will be. It does leave a blank Wednesday, at least in the record. Our understanding would be that what was happening on Tuesday probably spilled into Wednesday as well. Each day has a purpose. We've already talked about a couple of these. He, of course, when he comes into town on the donkey, if you read from Zechariah 9, beginning in verse 9, through verse 10 is important that you have this reigning from sea to sea idea, that he is going to be the king of the Gentiles as well as Israel. But the idea that he's the king of the entire world, I think, is really what Jesus was trying to get to in that story. Again, he's not coming in as a warrior. He's coming in on the locomotion of a donkey, which was the favorite peacetime animal of kings. But notice again, he is not coming as a conqueror, but as the Lord over the entire earth. Well, that leads to the next day when he cleanses the temple. As I mentioned in a previous video, what he's trying to say is that Jewish religion is completely devoid of worth. In other words, the temple itself, which stood for God's presence on earth, Yahweh's actual presence, as it were, Jesus rejected that, and that they had turned this into a den of murderers. The word thieves, again in Greek, does not capture very well how Jeremiah, the original sound of Jeremiah, which is a very violent person. So the idea of being king of the Gentiles, king of the entire world, and then turning the next day and saying no to the temple is again a good 1-2 punch that is very related. And that really leads then into, and probably this lasted into Wednesday as well, are a series of confrontations that are very individual, sometimes leveled at the people of Israel, but more so it's a final plea and a final warning that if people do not turn to Yahweh in repentance, the nation and even individuals will suffer dire consequences. So Tuesday is given to numerous controversies, very famous ones, and we'll get there eventually. And again, I believe this spills into Wednesday as well. Thursday, of course, is the Passover, the Paschal Meal, and that leads then into a night in which Jesus never sleeps, and he is crucified on Friday. By about 9 o'clock in the morning, he is on the cross. So he'll have 6 trials, and we'll talk through that there. By the way, each night or each day, he seems to be on the first day. We sense what's going to happen every day. He comes into the city of Jerusalem, and then he leaves at night and goes to Lazarus's home out in Bethany, about a 2-mile walk out to Bethany. And so that seems to happen every night. He realizes, again, he's in a very dangerous situation here when it comes to his life. And so he retreats to his good friend Lazarus's home each night, and then comes back into the temple area in the morning. One more thing, and oh, by the way, here is where this is tomorrow in our reading of John. There seems to be an event that is in the text in Mark 14:3 through 11 that actually takes place, and I'll argue this tomorrow, show how this seems to work, a dinner that takes place on the Friday previous. This will be John 12 and then 13 through 17. Commonly it's believed and just taught, I guess, that John 13 through 17 is the Passover story, but there's no discussion of there's no mention of Passover in John 12 through 17. And the only event that makes people usually think that this is the same story as the Passover meal is that Judas is identified as the betrayer. But I'll recommend from the text that these are two separate stories, and that we have one story here of Judas being identified and leaving at the end of chapter 13, and we have him not leaving here when there's a Passover meal here. This will be a different meal than this one here that we'll study next time. Well, in the end, one more thing. Did God want, let's ask this question now, does God, the Father, want Jesus to go through the horror of the crucifixion? We are brought to this idea, or having to say yes, in this sense, that Isaiah will say, Isaiah 53, I believe it's verse 10, it pleased the Lord to bruise him, in predicting and speaking of the servant who would die for the sins of the nation. Isaiah 53 even says it pleased Yahweh that this would happen to his servant. Also, when Jesus is praying in the garden, he'll say, not my will, but thine be done. So we will have to even include that very strong word, will. It will be the will of Yahweh that Jesus suffer and die. One other thing, though, that we need to put into that, and it's going to happen here in tomorrow's discussion, was it Satan's desire to see the crucifixion? I would say this is the one time, maybe there are others, but clearly this is that climaxing moment of history where the will of both Yahweh and Satan are for the same thing. In this interesting twist of fate, God will want to see this happen for reasons all his own, as will Satan. He will also want to see Jesus die. So let's watch how that plays out in this last week of Jesus' life.